Damos agora início à sessão Empreendedorismo Digital. As empresas jovens representam já 35% do tecido empresarial português e 46% dos novos empregos. Há cada vez mais estruturas de apoio e incentivo que estimulam a criação de startups. Como potenciar este ecossistema? Que papel para as grandes empresas na inovação aberta? A vossa atenção para o moderador deste painel.
Boa tarde. Chamo-me Jason, sou americano, from Seattle. So I'm going to switch to English now because it would take about 25 minutes for me to get through about 3 only session that I appreciate you guys switching over on my account. It's an honor for me to be here. I've recently moved here from Seattle, Washington to head up our evangelism division at Microsoft Portugal. And I get to work with startups and students and developers, as well as companies that are looking to innovate. And so when Anna asked me to lead a panel about innovation and digital, kind of a digital revolution inside of Portugal, it was a really natural fit, and I'm super honored that I was asked by the association to help out. So I'm just getting to know Andrea, but for the rest of the panel, I feel like I've gotten to know them over the last couple months, and so it's incredibly exciting for me to be able to guide our discussion today. I consider each of them friends, as well as critical parts to the ecosystem here in Portugal. They each have had tremendous success in their own right and have an energy that really resembles what I find that's happening here in Portugal. It's about this spirit and this rebirth that's been happening over the last few years, and all about doing things new, doing things through technology, and just kind of breaking free of the things that have held peoples and companies back in the past. So I want to say thank you guys for doing this, and also to thank you for the welcome that you've given me over the last few months. And I feel like I'm becoming more and more Portuguese every day. So thank you guys. We're going to start off with Andrea. Andrea comes from Farfetch, so I'm just going to ask the audience. This is going to be an interactive session here. Who knows Farfetch? That's fantastic. So, who knows the term unicorn? Okay, it's about half. For the rest of the audience, a unicorn is what we call in the tech world a startup that's gone from nothing and is now valued at about $1 billion US. And so they are our unicorn here in Portugal. And one of the things we'll discuss later on is, like, are they the unicorn? Are they the first unicorn in this wave about what's going to come over the next couple of years? I'm so glad that you're on this panel, because you represent, you yourself to me represent everything that's not only great about Portugal, but also too this whole new world dynamic that embodies, I think, Farfetch, but also too what we're seeing as the world becomes smaller. She's lived all over the globe, has this great varied background from finance, where she and I were talking, it quickly became a choice for her not to pursue finance, but having the rigor and the mental model about finance and what it takes has led her into what became a very successful startup, Gleam, which was actually right in favor of ventures, incubation and funding wheelhouse, and then eventually they were sold to Farfetch, where she has stayed and has flourished inside of Farfetch. So we'll talk about that and her running the branch office here in Lisbon. Let's do a little intro. Jose, if you could do a little roll. There's a 1-2 minute video clip of Farfetch that I think would be interesting for us to see. right, so now, anybody who didn't have their hands raised before, who knows about Farfetch? All right, so we'll dive into what they're doing and their play in the ecosystem here in a little bit. Celso Martino, who doesn't know Celso? He's a lion in the industry here. I feel like I almost shouldn't even introduce him. So for those of you that don't know, he's the founder of Sapo, which for years was, synonymous with technology and the web and really our gateway for a lot of people in Portugal out to the internet, what they use for their content. That's where everybody I think here has used Sapo in the past to get their daily digestion of information. So Celso actually is also kind of the serial entrepreneur in his own in his career, and he's now has founded and has set up an accelerator, which I think is like all three of our accelerator friends up here have this new model about not just being a house for startups, but really kind of nurturing from a mentorship perspective, providing a place for them to be, providing technology and providing funding. And so we'll talk about his view and what's happening and what they're doing over at Bright Pixel. They also have a great event coming up next month called Pixel Camp. So head on up to the web and check that out. I'll also talk about Alexandre Barbosa. We mentioned him just briefly a little bit ago on Faber Ventures. So Alexandre is really, he's the CEO and founding member and board member of Faber Ventures. And just like Bright Pixel, they have this whole philosophy about really taking both arms around the startups that are curated from an ideation or those that are a little bit further along into their venture and into their accelerator. So he's also very involved in the community from a mentorship perspective and in some of the other government agencies that we're working with as far as a daily and weekly mentorship and really helping the community to grow out. And then Pedro is the CEO and one of the founders of Beta I, another name that all you guys should be familiar with, and if you're not, you should definitely check them out. He's not only the CEO, but his whole thing is about how do we help and how do we get the community at large going? And then how do we help our startups to become successful in their own right? I think one of the fun things lately is that they've become the hackathon masters. And so they've got a really great model on how to do the right hackathon with the right intention and the right outcomes. Not only that, but I would say that Beta I and really Pedro has been really involved in entrepreneurialism worldwide. And whether it's different organizations or having Beta I reach out to other accelerator partners and other places around the globe, they are really branching out. And I think that speaks volumes for what we're trying to do in Portugal, what the startup scene can do in Portugal if we have the right support as a community behind them. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to go sit down. So thank you guys. We want to make this a real interactive session. We're going to hopefully have some laughs up here and talk about some of the subject matters that are concerning us as we look into helping transform Portugal digitally and helping our startups get out there and be successful. So welcome, guys and lady. Welcome. We're going to talk about a few things. And so it would be great I'm going to probably direct some of the questions to all, and then I'm also going to do some of these are very, very specific. So by no means is this debate format like the U.S. political system on Monday night, but we'll just have a good discussion here. I want to kind of start off by saying, what's the state of the startup ecosystem right now in Portugal? This is a question for everybody. And I would put on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, this is Silicon Valley of Europe. 1 being, why are we even doing this? We're not making an impact. And so, given today, right now, where are you guys on that? Pedro, why don't you start off?
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So, Jason, going to your question, I think we are in kind of puberty. So maybe it's 5, 6. But the thing we are suffering from pains of growing up very fast. I don't know what the right name in English. But so we in the last 3 years, we developed really fast. So the ecosystem changed a lot. I think that the first seeds have been planted for a long period, but in the last 5 to 3, we grew very fast. And yeah, so I think we are in about on the 6.
So when you say growing very fast, almost like we've hit puberty. If we were a kid, we're like, we just hit puberty.
Yeah, so now we have our first success. We have some understanding what we are. We are proud about for ourselves, understanding more about the ecosystem. But I don't know if you want me to go deep in that, or just...
No, we'll pop over. Alexandra.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all.
Thank you.
I think I'd be less generous than Pedro, actually. I'd say maybe 4 or 5. And maybe the analogy, since we're investors, is probably the life cycle of a fund. A fund is typically 10 years in life cycle. The ecosystem has been actively going on for, say, 3 to 5 years. So I would say we're sort of 40% there. I think there's still a lot to come. Although 2016, I think, is a turning point in the ecosystem, because the very first signs, and maybe you're expecting me to mention Web Summit, I wouldn't. I would say Andrea is actually the showcase of the first sign of a full cycle. When the market itself, a certain industry, actually recognizes that startups are disrupting the way a certain industry works. And so to accelerate the pace of innovation and to keep in the forefront of a certain category, they actually start acquiring talent, acquiring products, acquiring businesses. And that's the whole purpose of accelerating the pace of evolution. And entrepreneurs are doing it faster, with larger impact, and in more efficient ways than legacy corporates. Hence the collaboration between founders, investors, and other types of players in the ecosystem. So I would say until we have this as a repeatable, scalable pattern, I would say we're still 3 to 4.
Andrea.
Hi, everyone. I think it's still early days, but I would give it a 5. So, so from what I've seen, and my case, and
You've been there, right? You've created a company called Gleam. You partnered up with Favor.
Yeah.
You've actually had success, and you sold it.
Exactly.
And then now you're helping
It
a
took
company
me
that bought you out.
3 years. Yeah, exactly. It took me 3 years, but it's been a huge struggle around everything, around product, hiring the best talented people here in Lisbon, actually selling product itself, because Gleam was a startup with a mobile app for fashion discovery and shopping, and then we launched a platform aimed at brands looking at real-time insights from the consumer, and that was really tough to sell, because companies, they're not willing to risk integrating a product that it's not fully developed. So that's one of the biggest challenges we now have, is that we have great companies, and I can mention a few from Feedzai, Talkdesk, Hole19, Uniplaces, a lot of great products, great teams, fighting for the market. And sometimes when it's a B2B, when you depend on the industry to survive and to grow your product, what we feel is like the industry is not actually prepared to look at your product, integrate your product, and assume the risk.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Okay, so are we supposed to score?
I would love your score.
So I'll give it a 3, maybe. I think everything's been said about the young age of the ecosystem. I have nothing to add to that. But having said this, I think Portugal's living a magical moment in several ways. I think, we were extremely unfit for entrepreneurship as a culture.
Yeah.
throughout the last decade. I mean, I had classes in entrepreneurship in the university, if that's even possible. And my teacher he had a cookie factory, so I know all about cookies. And I'm not talking about web cookies. So, you know, Portuguese have high aversion to risk. We don't like failure, and we don't like success either at the same time, which is interesting. But the positive thing about the whole phenomenon that's been happening for the last years is that I see a huge cultural change in the new generation. So, and that's very positive. And as Alexandra said, I think that if the change is going to continue and we see a repetitive pattern, we're going to do fine. But yeah, I think there's a long road ahead. I think the next stage will be pain on the Gartner curve, and then maybe we find the road to, you know, growth and sustainability.
So what is, I'm going to have a follow-up for you. What is that, in your mind, what's that pain look like?
Well, I mean, there's only a few cases that have gone to the last mile of the cycle. We're in the beginning of the process. So there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of opportunities, but we need to, you know, separate what works from what doesn't work. And I think that hasn't been done yet. But I mean, it's part of the process. I'm not trying to say this as a negative thing. I'm just stating that we should be aware that it's part of the process.
So on that note, is it, if you were an outside investor from outside Portugal, is it wise to invest in Portuguese startups?
Do you want me to answer that?
Well, at one point or another, I'm going to ask it to you. So,
I mean, I'm the new kid on the block on that side, to be honest. But my personal opinion, this is the right time to start. And I think the road that the founders and the entrepreneurs in Portugal have been doing for the last 3, 4, 5 years didn't happen for investors yet in Portugal. And that needs to happen. I think it will be the next step. So this is the beginning, and the beginning is where you find the biggest opportunities, and I think it's the right time.
what about you, Pedro?
So maybe I go back because I thought you wanted just me to rank the ecosystem, not to elaborate too much on it. So let me give you my perspective on
Yes.
the maturity of the ecosystem, then I'll go back to this question regarding investment. So I think BTI, we are 6 years old, so, and I think we have been around for a bit, and contributing, also being with interesting perspective on the growth of the ecosystem. So in the last 6 years, a lot of things evolved, and when we started, yeah, the culture was a huge problem. And along with culture, we created BTI in 2009, was the middle of the crisis, so everyone was in panic, what we'll do. And so we decided to create BTI in order to push a new culture. And at the time, there was no smart investors. There was no mentoring. No one, very few people did an exit. Very few people had real experience on startups, even in tech and investment. So it was really hard to do something serious on entrepreneurship. But I think in the last years, what we've seen is that with the crisis, a lot of people, good people, came out of big corporations. And this was mentors or investors, and these kind of people started to be our bridges to international markets, to investments, and these are the kind of relationships that links to the was lacking. It was a knowledge of entrepreneurship, how to start a company, what to do. The Portuguese were, and I think it's something Latin, it's general, that it would to focus on the idea. So I have a great idea, so I'm going to be a millionaire, it's going to be a success overnight. And it takes a lot of time, and it's painful, and you have to do it lean, and you have to really understand how to achieve product market fit, and there's a lot of skills that you need to have. That's why we come and start working with the accelerators and doing these models of teaching a bit how to create a startup. And with this, I think the accelerators become a very interesting platform to aggregate a lot of these players around a specific urge of let's do entrepreneurship and create great startups. And what happened is that suddenly with things like the Lisbon Challenge and the Seed Camp coming here, and so a lot of things start happening that showcase our entrepreneurs to outside. And suddenly, like Whole 19 and Codacy and many crowd products, a lot of those startups were invested by international investors. I think what your question is that the first investor, of course, there were some investments in the past, but I think with Seed Camp, I think was an interesting moment because although it was a very early stage investor, it was international and was very known. Right. And because they started investing in Portuguese startups, this highlighted the Portuguese entrepreneurs as top international standards. And this made two things. One was the fear of missing out of the Portuguese investors that thought that had the power and really treat entrepreneurs with a
when I'm ready, when I'm ready.
Yeah.
Not when you're ready, but when I'm ready.
Yeah, and then suddenly they saw international investors investing really fast. And they say, whoa, I have to change my attitude.
Yeah.
And the second thing was an investment like Seed Camp that a lot of people start looking to Lisbon and saying, whoa, there's something happening in Lisbon, so let's start looking. So they start coming, and one day, and then they meet Faber, and they will start up Lisbon, and then they meet other players, and then they see many places, and they see TalkDesk, and they see all these dots, and they start building a curve, a trend. And I think now we have the Web Summit, everyone is talking about this, but I think this is also accumulation of many different factors. And it's all that. It's an ecosystem that is being built, and that's some examples of success that have happened. Of course, the cycle has not been completely. Sure. There's very few exits. I hope that we have IPOs soon and some really good trade sales. We start to see some IPOs. This year we had some. Of course, we're going to have a pain period, and the pain period is a lot of startups are going to die. And the big ones, the ones that everyone is talking, maybe some of them will close that up as well. But that's part of the ecosystem. Part of it. And being able to deal with that, I think it's very important. A mature ecosystem is also an ecosystem that is able to deal with failure in a good way. And then we have to find a way to invest in the good resources. But I think what we've been proving in the last rounds, in the last year, almost over 200 million, 250 million were invested in Portugal, in Portuguese startups, and early stage seeds to round Bs. And most of them were invested and led by international investors. And this shows that Portugal is a good country.
The word's out, yeah. The word is out.
To invest in. Yep. And it's something that has been happening over time for the last years. So
it'll be interesting to see, like, particularly the next year, what that balance shift looks like, yes. Right? So
although
the whole portfolio, what's the percentage that's international versus the domestic?
But it's still immature.
Sure.
We have conversations with the top investors, and they say, still the density is not there yet. We need much more really good stuff happening. And I think one of the challenges now, we have to be able to really produce more success. Some of the ones that we're talking about there have to really be big, and we have to bring new entrepreneurs, because I think for the last year or 2 years has been almost all the same people, the same startups that we talked about, and we have to change that.
Right. So you got to grow that base. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I agree with Pedro. I think, well, the short answer to your question is definitely yes. Yep. I think it's worth investing in companies that are started in Portugal, regardless of whether they are founded by Portuguese founders or by international founders coming to Lisbon or Porto to start their own companies. I think there's a certain mindset when you're actually founding a company and launching something commercially that's bright and different whenever you're starting in Portugal. I mean, half of our portfolio of 19 companies are companies either in London or in Berlin. Only half of our portfolio has a connection to Portugal, regardless of whether the founders are Portuguese or not. And almost 40% of the last rounds over the last 12 months of our portfolio were led by international VCs into Portuguese companies or UK companies. And I don't see a difference.
Sure.
I mean, the best of the best are the best everywhere and anywhere. And so I think we're past that question. I think we're past that stage. For the last 2-3 years, a lot of the discussion on panels from entrepreneurial experts was about how Portuguese people compare to international people. I think we're past that stage. I think now the challenge is, are we actually building companies that have a clear purpose and that will have a meaningful impact in their industries? Are we actually looking at potential pre-seed companies or seed stage companies or Series A stage companies that will actually disrupt and change how a certain industry operates? And that's by far the largest hope that we witness today in Portugal, is that even the new vintage of entrepreneurs who are taking part in Beta I's accelerator programs, who are working with Bright Pixel, who are at Uptech in Porto, or Startup Lisboa, or Startup Braga, these people have passed the stage of overwhelming admiration vis-a-vis the first vintage of entrepreneurs who had their exposure and press mentions and so on, and are now much more realistic about what it takes to build a proper company. Entrepreneurship and building successful startups is not about the seed stage. The seed stage is only the first 2 to 3 years in the lifetime of a company, and that implies a lot of hard work, a lot of responsibilities, and scaling that up as a successful business, as a successful franchise out there is really, really the hard part. And you're either fully committed to doing something differently and that has an impact in a certain industry, or it's a meaningless effort to actually start a company. And I think that is starting to be very, very different on the entrepreneur side. On the investor side, I think what we lacked 4 years ago, 5 years ago, is dramatically different. I think you have several investors who are Portuguese-based, but who have been exposed to several co-investments with international investors, have learned a lot over the last 3 years. I can speak for ourselves. We've learned so much from collaborating and competing with the most active Portuguese investors, the most active UK investors, the most active German investors, some US investors, and that's the way you learn. You learn on the job, and everybody's learning. So the way we mentor and we give back and we offer support to the companies we've been most recently investing in is substantially different from what we were doing 3 years ago.
Sure.
So obviously our expectations are much higher. If you look at batches, the cohort of 2016 of our investments, we are obviously expecting a higher rate of success than the cohort of 2014. It's how it goes. But my personal humble opinion is definitely yes. There's a huge opportunity to offer exposure and international careers to Portuguese founders or people who stop by Lisbon or Porto to start their companies. Andrea is one bright example of that. Over the next 6 to 12 months, we were discussing prior to the panel, I think we will witness a handful of companies announcing
getting picked up,
significant large rounds internationally. And I think credibility will build up, but credibility isn't built only from successful founders. It has to be a network with a few nodes.
It has to be an ecosystem,
it's
for sure.
Entrepreneurs, it's other agents and operators, it's investors. I mean, given the size of Portugal, no real international VC will set up shop in Portugal. So they will look to co-invest with Portuguese investors.
Right.
For Portuguese investors to be credible among international
They better
VCs.
bring the goods.
I mean, they have to put their money where their mouth is. They'll have to be, we will have to be able to invest not only in Portugal, but also outside Portugal.
Yep.
We will have to be able to prove that we can add value to the startups we invest in, as international VCs try to do. And it has to be sort of a food chain. We have to be, as an ecosystem, proving that we can offer a better investment case for international VCs than other countries in terms of deal flow.
Andrea, you've lived all over the globe, Mexico, China, back here in Portugal. So, I mean, I would personally I'd probably agree about 80% of what you were saying. I think that there's still an international piece that I think that is a proven thing that we've got to do here in Portugal. I think that's on a case-by-case basis. You know, there is not, part of it is because there's just not the volume, right? You were in Beijing, and that was, 2008 was still kind of early-ish on in that startup ecosystem world, but I mean, the amount of startups now that are coming out of that, it's like a factory that's coming out of there. So what's your kind of take on that? Now that you've lived internationally, you've seen it out there.
Yeah, I've seen both sides. So I did corporate for a long time. Then I came to Lisbon for the startup scene. So I knew Alexandre before, what was being built here in Lisbon. And I thought it was an opportunity to actually create more value and create a company with a purpose. So the thing about creating your own startup is about actually changing something, adding value to other companies, to customers, whatever. Hiring talented people, creating something new. And Lisbon gave me that opportunity. Of course, I don't believe that staying in Portugal means that you're going to succeed now, that a lot of investors are looking at Portugal as well. And, well, Farfetch is a clear roots in Portugal, because now Farfetch was created in 2008. We're now 1,100 people across 11 offices. The biggest office is located in Portugal. So opening this new office in Lisbon, yeah. And we're hiring up to 300 people if anyone's interested. So it's precisely because we see in Portugal a huge opportunity to actually build something better. And I think the idea from Jose Naves was exactly that. So he sees in Portugal a lot of potential, an opportunity to grow his company, but he has his biz dev, his marketing teams, his consumer-facing teams, all based in London, Shanghai, LA, New York. Okay. But the fundamentals, like the core business tech team, is still here.
Yeah. So it's about keeping the core of where you are here, but making sure that you're visibly
because
out
there
there.
is potential. Even for a unicorn, there is there is an opportunity.
So on that note, I think there's two pieces where I go with this, and it's on that note of looking forward. I think we've got, you know, every corner that you go to and every street that you walk down, somebody's mentioning Web Summit, right? So, you know, how do we take a look at what Web Summit being here? What's the expectations out of it? What's the worry that comes in it? Yeah, Celso.
First of all, I think the Web Summit is great. I mean, it's huge. It's going to attract a lot of people from abroad. They will be surprised if they're not already.
Yep.
The question should be, will we be able to take advantage of the Web Summit after the Web Summit?
Yep.
And I think we will. I mean, everything's aligned so that we will take advantage of that. I think we were mentioning, you know, Portuguese talent working abroad and how that's positive for startups and companies. But I also think it's very important for Portugal to attract founders from abroad to work in Portugal, as well as investors.
And does Web Summit give us that ability?
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think Portugal is an excellent country with, I know, all the attributes we know, not the salaries. I don't think we should be proud. I mean, it's a fact that the salaries are low, but I don't think we should be proud of that. The Web Summit will also attract...
Showcases that, and then provides that avenue for
Yeah.
afterwards. Those are the, I mean, I came here from Seattle. I lived in Seattle for 25 years. I came here with intention, right? There is a specific reason. And it goes beyond just an event of Web Summit, but it's all the things you talk about. Like the infrastructure is there, the energy is there, the talent on the technical side is there. And I think there's an ecosystem play that is supportive, you know, to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you know, having founders in Portugal that have been through the pains of creating and closing several startups and setting up base in Portugal is contagious to our own founders and to Portuguese talent and entrepreneurs.
I think it's a contagious start that you're talking about. I mean, when you talk about like a scale of 1 to 10 and it's only at a 3, I just see that as opportunity.
Sure.
Right? I don't see that as I can't believe we're only at a 3 right now.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, Alessandra, I don't know if you've changed your mind, but I'll put you on the spot. Is that when you and I first met, the Web Summit came up, and you had this like, yeah. And then your comment was really, really interesting. He said, it was, I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, I'm afraid that Web Summit, there's so much talk and hype about it that we collectively are going to lose focus on what got us to this point and then where we need to go. Is that still how you feel?
I think I'll feel that way for the next 3 years. I think the impact of the Web Summit can be awesome for Portugal. I'm confident it will. I don't think we will be able to do that assessment next November. I think we will do so in 3 years' time because it's a collection of 3 events. It's not only 2016. Change takes time, and I think we have to be, building successful companies takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of focus. And I think the same applies to whatever value we want to extract from the 50, 60, 80,000 people that will be in Portugal for that week or 2. If we do our hustle, if we prepare for the Web Summit, if we are collectively collaborating in such a way that we start that momentum this November and conduct a sort of a build-up over the next 2-3 years, I think it can be tremendously impactful for Portugal. I just think we can't be superficial. I don't think look at Ireland. What's the legacy of Web Summit for the Irish ecosystem? I'm sure it had some impact, but was it that impactful? I think it can be impactful if you really plan ahead, if you know what you want to extract from that.
From year 1 and then extract from year 2.
And from the people and from the way the Web Summit, look, the Web Summit is, in my opinion, a huge celebration of how entrepreneurs are accelerating the pace of change, you know? I mean, how we're evolving industries, how we're using technology to change the way we live and work. And that's why the get-together of such a massive collection of people is so impactful. If you visited Dublin for the last 3 or 4 years, that's what happened. That's what will happen in Lisbon. And I think we don't even have a realistic notion of what we will be exposed to in Lisbon over the first half of November.
Right.
If we adequately live that, then we will be building trust among the local community. We will be building the credibility of technology and becoming a founder and risking your life to change the status quo of something. Among also those sectors that are more classical, more risk-averse, and that have been slightly more distant from the tech world than the entrepreneurs and investors and the people who are already part of that industry. We need the private sector to become investors in Portuguese managed funds. We need the private sector funds to invest in Beta I, to invest in Brightpixel, to invest in Faber, to invest in other investors. We need local VCs to co-invest with international VCs in Portuguese-born companies. And that has to be, we need Portuguese corporations to acquire Portuguese-born startups. There's no reason why several startups in Portugal are, as of today, negotiating potential transactions with potential acquirers, and they're all international. There's no reason why open innovation in the corporate world shouldn't consider acquisitions of startups to accelerate the pace of innovation. And that's still a learning process. My hope is that the Web Summit will bring a relevant contribution to the change of mindset of everyone. And socially, by the way, I mean, Lisbon as a city has never seen, I mean, it's not the International Conference of Doctors. It's not the convention of car makers, dealers, you know? It's people who are actually changing the world we witness every day on the news. They'll be here. You either take advantage of that or not. Yep. So it's a huge responsibility for everyone involved. We've been successful in bringing with the Web Summit to Portugal, the ones who directly did it, and all of us indirectly who have been contributing to that process. Right. It's our responsibility to extract value over the next 3 years.
Yeah, we're the caretakers, right? So we are the caretakers. And I think that's for the audience as well. This whole room are the caretakers of making sure that there's something on the other side of that event. You know, you mentioned the pace of change, and I think it's the people that are at that event are the 40, 50,000 of the minds that are trying to change the pace in which we do things and disrupt. Pedro, at your accelerator, how do you guys tackle staying ahead of that pace of change?
Yeah. I'll answer this into the Web Summit as well. I think there's different kind of accelerators. I mean, right now at BTI we are focused mainly on two things. So one is the Lisbon Challenge, which is more and more investment driven. So the objective is to really help startups to grow, find product market fit, and then at the end of the program be able to raise a serious round. And in that sense, it's very difficult to have a competitive accelerator based in Lisbon that is investment driven, because compete with Y Combinator, Techstars, these kind of people. They have completely different kind of resources in terms of investment, and the liquidity of the pace of how investors invest in the startups, it's slower. So, but we are working very much on that. In that sense, the Web Summit also plays an interesting role because it makes more awareness and more liquidity, and becomes easier for us. I think what the Web Summit in a way gives is it's a very interesting marketing strategy, and gives us a notoriety and credibility that would take us a bit longer to get.
Yeah.
So you have to leverage you have to leverage on that. So suddenly it's not, you don't take so long, because I've been pitching everywhere for years, and it's really, really hard to pitch internationally. And so suddenly, if you're pitching an accelerator, tech accelerator based in Lisbon, and say, the Web Summit is there, it's easier. So it's started to be easier to talk with LPs and other people, and easier to have a real top accelerator based in here. Although Lisbon Challenge is performing quite well, and it's among the best European accelerators. In the second angle, what we are working a lot, and goes with the last words of Alexandre, is on the corporate accelerators. So we are here at the Congress of PTC, and it's one of the main topics is the disruption of how technology and the web and everything is disrupting most of the industries, and how big corporations can keep the pace, and how the startups can be part of that equation. And so we are doing a lot of corporate accelerators. And what we try to do is really to understand how this has affected the business of big companies, and looking at their roadmap of innovation, understanding what are the challenges and how startups can really add value to that through accelerators.
In my world, I'm working with Microsoft works with existing software companies that have solutions that in the cloud, that are agile, that are a modern-based approach to solutions. And interesting what I found, particularly in Portugal, that a lot of the commercial-driven accelerators or the enterprise accelerators, they might have a problem today that they want to create an accelerator to solve a problem that they've got today. And when I talked to them, I was like, there's 5 or 6 software companies today that could solve your problem. You don't need to create an accelerator. But there is a mental model around a lot of I think the enterprise companies about, I have to have an innovation arm, I have to have an accelerator in order to be considered innovative and modern.
But this is the first debate. Having it just for the sake of having, I think it's the wrong answer. I think you have to understand how this is interesting for you. And there's different ways for you to innovate in terms you can do internal innovation, you can do research with the partnerships with university, technical institutes and so on. But I think startups are also a great partner. And I think it's not only to develop core solutions, but it's what technology allows you to give like cloud-based and APIs. So startups can build a lot of solutions on top of the technology of bigger corporations. And I think this can accelerate a lot because it's very difficult for big corporations to keep innovative and keep coming up with good solutions when you can reach out to the intelligence of the startups. But this process takes a lot of time. So if you create an accelerator just for the sake of, hey, look at me, I'm so innovative, no, I'm cool, no. You should be serious about it, and we are more and more looking at this as a process of reducing the time for M&As and for integration of startups in the corporations,
in enterprise,
and the outcome really to be concrete pilots, to be concrete outcomes, to really to create value into the corporations, and you can reduce a lot the cycle of integration, you can reduce the cost of innovation, and you can really leverage the value that corporations capture by doing this in partnership with organizations like us and many other solutions like Brightpixel also is a very good case of open innovation and is born more from the corporate world, but we come from outside. But I think this is the future, and if you want to accelerate this faster,
that's where you go. Yeah.
It's where you go, and we are here at this Congress. I think it's very interesting that people look at this. And the Web Summit, I think, also raised attention on that. Every CEO of big corporations now is paying more attention to this.
Has more their mindset around that. Well, I think like AWC, it's a great example. This is the first time that there's been a showcase of startups here at the event.
It takes time. So if you think that you're going to invest and be a sponsor on the event and things change overnight, no, it takes a bit of time, and you have to be...
Fundamental change. Takes time.
And one thing that a message you'd like to send to any CEO if this is here also is that, and linked to Web Summit, they came here, one of the reasons was also the Wi-Fi. And Portugal has been very known by the technology infrastructure. I think if we have to keep on the verge, so investing in 5G and really being on the forefront of technology infrastructure is really important. So we should not delay the investments being done in that area because this is critical for all the solutions that can be done on top of it.
I'm going to do, we are about at time. We got a little bit of a late start with the other session, running a little long. I see some people starting to leave, so I was hoping to have a couple of questions from the audience, but I think that we are out of time. I'm getting, no, not out of time. 5 minutes. We have five. The boss says 5 minutes. We're going to take the 5. So let's take a couple questions, and then I want to leave just a quick wrap up with the awesome panel. So let's take a question from the audience. The lady right by the camera. Yes. Can you stand up? Where are you from, and what's your question?
Hi, my name's Eleanor Legback, and my question is, now that you've clearly all made it. How are we going to raise Portugal's profile?
This is not a question for me. I have not made it. I have not made it yet.
Sorry,
No.
gentlemen.
But
I think it's not the question is not about raising the profile. It's how to keep up with the promise of that we deliver, that we are creating. I think we have to keep up with the promise. That's the question.
what about
I
you,
would say.
Andrea? What do you think?
I think this it's a big challenge, but it passes through industry here in Portugal as well. So for myself, Gleam was an example. So Farfetch acquired us for not only the technology, because we were startup driven, so we wanted to build new stuff, integrate new stuff. And that really gives the example, because Farfetch is no longer a startup. So we're growing at a pace of a startup, more than 60% a year, but we're not a startup anymore. And we need to be innovative, and we also have this challenge about being a
How
huge...
do you stay?
We're a big corporation. We're not moving as fast as we want to. We're not agile
There's new
anymore.
processes, right? There's
so
new
we need to
things,
learn
yeah.
from startups.
Yeah.
And one of the things is actually working with startups. I don't say that the reality is that we need to acquire all the startups, no, but we need to start working with them, and the accelerated programs are a great example.
Great way for you guys to keep, keep pulse.
Yeah,
keep the
exactly,
pulse.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to be more, less risk adverse. We need to start integrating these products into our companies.
And into the DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. How about you, Alexander?
Well, I think there's two things I think have to be done to continue to raise Portugal's profile internationally. And one thing is to make sure that the current vintage of founders that have been achieving the first stage of success, like raising the first international round of funding and growing up to 40 people, 50 people, 60 people companies, can continue to grow and sustain their businesses and reach profitability as soon as possible, because that's the whole purpose of building a commercial business, which is offer dividend distribution to the shareholders and producing a positive bottom line. So if we're successful in making sure that this initial cohort of founders actually achieves a more mature stage of their companies, I think it will, we as a country will become closer to being a benchmark. And I think all individual actors on stage and the remaining ones outside of this stage have to continue to keep our heads down, work hard, roll up the sleeves, and not only keep up with the pace of the existing cohort, but also making sure that we do a better work with the next set of founders.
I think that's interesting. I think that's when you look at the next set, is what you mentioned before, is the bar has got to get raised. Let's take another question. Probably one more. In the back, way in the back. No, yeah, go ahead. Yep. Sorry, the mic was right there. So
Can I?
Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, what needs to be done to keep all this spirit of entrepreneurship in-house, I mean, in Portugal? What do you think needs to be prepared? What needs to be built up in Portugal to give all this power to the entrepreneurship that you are talking about?
Celso, you want to take that? It's a pretty loaded, I mean, it's a super complex question, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in the hands of entrepreneurs in Portugal right now. And I feel that, you know, we that don't have shortage of opportunities and incentives and instruments to help entrepreneurs building their companies and you know, eventually being
keeping that going, right? It's just,
yes.
I mean, yeah.
What I think that's missing is a certain level of maturity.
Yep.
You know, doing the cultural shift and getting a new generation of students coming from the universities that want to be entrepreneurs. And we've built
and get them in. And get them
hundreds of startups in Portugal.
Yep.
And there's a lot of incentives in our country right now. but we need to see the numbers, and we need to see if they're able to be, you know, CEOs of meaningful companies after this phase. And you know, it's up to them. It's not up to the,
Right.
it's not up to us. Yeah.
Just quick.
You do it
comment.
quick, you bet.
The only thing is that if you look at Farfetch, I think we should not misread the signs of what entrepreneurs are really building. These companies that today are sort of the new kids on the block and the cherry on top of the cake, you know, on a speaker's agenda at a conference will be the employers of tomorrow. These companies will be driving employment in Portugal.
That's right.
These companies will be producing the highest returns for their shareholders. They will be the stock market benchmark companies, whatever they get indexed. And so I think
kind of feed that, right?
I really look forward to the next 10 years when we look back and say, oh, look at those people who actually made jokes about entrepreneurs who were building crappy apps or crappy websites. It's part of the learning process. And some of these will definitely succeed, and they will kick ass to the corporate world. That's it.
Hopefully in Portugal.
Hopefully in Portugal. All right, you know, and have a good balance. I think that, you know, Farfetch is a great example. If you to make it, you really got to get outside. You have to have Portugal plus, right? You got to have an addition. It's got to be plus. You know, on that note, I will say that, you know, we actually embrace that obviously as a global company at Microsoft, and in the community here in Portugal with Active Art Portugal, a lot of our focus this year is on international and how do we help Portuguese startups grow internationally. And I think that's where a lot of the energy will help fuel that, is getting those guys and supporting them to go internationally. You know, we even have an event right before Web Summit that's all about what does it take to get your business up and out and over to the US. That's actually going to be in partnership with the US Embassy on the 18th of October at Microsoft. And so that's kind of, to you guys' point, it's like that's what it's got to be to fuel out and to keep that raising the bar next and next. We are out of time. I would say in a lightning 15 seconds, what's the one, if you put it down to one thing, what are you going to do over the next 2 years to keep changing?
I think for everyone, I think the most important thing is stay flexible and stay cautious about who you are and being innovative all the time, because we are our worst enemies sometimes. And
Flexibility.
And as a CEO, as a culture in the company.
Celso.
I'm going to make Bright Pixel the best company in the world for the next years.
Awesome.
Keep up the startup DNA.
DNA.
Focus. We're on a mission to build the best seed operator in Iberia, and that's what we're going to stay focused in building. That's it.
Looks like you and Celso need to talk.
Yeah. We'll feed our deal flow to Celso because he'll be the world umbrella.
Okay, there we go. Perfect, perfect. I would like to thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. You know, the brain power from here over is super strong on the stage, and so I thank you guys from this point on. I thank you guys very much. It's a pleasure, and thank you guys for the partnership.